Meanwhile, Eddie Lacy is trading in the Lambeau Leap for the 12s, agreeing to terms on a one-year deal with the Seattle Seahawks. The deal is worth $5.55 million, including $3 million in guaranteed money. That, according to our Adam Schefter. Now, this, according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the former Packers running back weighed in at 267 pounds during one of his free agent visits.
We would not have done this if we didn't have a really clear understanding of where, how we're going to go forward. This is a big deal for him. It's a one-year contract for him. This is a chance for him to prove it and show where he is in the league and how he fits in and how he can, work to secure a good future for him. And he knows all of that. And I want him big. I want him big and tough and strong. But I want him in the best shape so that he can run at his best and be durable and handle the load. That 235 is that's when about the time he came out, was there. But he's developed him. In those 40s, he's really dangerous.
All right, Max, so obviously that's Pete Carroll, who just signed him, reacting to the weight gain there, and he showed up to some of the visits at 267, played last year at 234. Good or bad signing for Seattle?
It's a bad signing, and I really don't understand it. Why do you look? Does Green Bay need a running game? Yeah, and they just let this guy go to a conference rival for a one-year prove-it type contract. Why do you think that is if they need a running game? Eddie Lacy was elite for a couple of years behind a top offensive line with the best quarterback in the world. And then he got fat. And I remember this distinctly because I took him in the first round, I believe, of our Sports Nation fantasy draft that year and was very disappointed. I mean, he got fat, he got ineffective, and then he got hurt. And now he's checking in close to 270. How is, and by the way, to run behind a bad offensive line ever since they got rid of Max Unger, they haven't been any good in Seattle on the offensive line, and they don't invest many resources until very recently in terms of draft picks or money into the O-line. So why does this guy help you? I don't get it, Stephen A. Why does this guy help them when Green Bay needs help and they let him walk?
Because they have nothing to lose. That's why. And that's why I agree with this signing, and I disagree with you. Christian Michael and Thomas Rawls were their top two rushers in Seattle. One ran for 400-plus yards. The other ran for 300-plus yards. Both only played 9 games, which means they missed 7. So you have two guys who have questionable durability, and then even when they're on the field, you don't know what they're going to give you. Plus, in a guy like Eddie Lacy, you're looking at somebody, even though I don't think he has a snowball's chance of being the second coming of beast mode, he does give you a level of rough and ruggedness that you believe that you're lacking in Seattle. So you combine those two elements with the fact that he has a one-year contract where he has something to prove and he's playing for more money. No one is more incentivized than him to step out on the field and produce. And in the case of, we're really holding the fact that he was fat a couple of years ago against him. This past season, he suffered that ankle injury. I think he only played in like 5 games. And as a result, what happened is that Eddie Lacy wasn't able to work out, which is why he's at 267. So now that he's gotten healthy and you have the entire offseason to get yourself into conditioning, and Pete Carroll doesn't want you at 220 or whatever. He wants you at 240. You're talking about him potentially losing 25 to 27 pounds. If that's the reality, then the risk is just minimal. The reward could potentially be great because you have a situation where it's going to be an upgrade compared to anything that you had. And again, Seattle had the 25th ranked rushing attack. Anything that you can get in between the numbers, particularly in short yardage situations where you got a big, bulky dude that can finish for you, particularly in those short yardage situations, that's going to help Russell Wilson. It's going to help the rest of the team, and I think you take a chance on it because he's incentivized. I don't
buy Eddie Lacy, and maybe you don't either, as a premium player anymore. Last couple of years, he's been a bust. I don't know how else to say it. And I don't
think he was a bust.
Last couple of years compared to where he was a couple of years ago, he went from premium to much less than that.
Well, let me answer that, and then you piggyback off of it from this perspective. 2 years ago was when Jordy Nelson went down. So what happened is Jordy Nelson goes down, and the receivers around you were questionable because Randall Cobb was now your number one. The James Starks of the world and the Devontae Adams was continuing to grow. He wasn't what he was this past season. The Richard Rodgers was there. He produced, but he was up and down. And there was questions about Green Bay's offensive line as well. So you had offensive line issues. You had receiving issues because Jordy Nelson was out, and you had opposing defenses stacking the line of scrimmage because they recognized that in run-like situations, situations, Eddie Lacy was basically their best weapon because even though Aaron Rodgers could throw the ball, guys were either dropping passes or they couldn't get open. And then this past year, he only played 5 games due to the injuries. Before that, he was a 1,000-yard-plus season. So you had 2 years ago an injury to Jordy Nelson, which just wrecked everything because the other receivers got exposed. And last year, he was injured. That's why I say it's not a bust.
Now he's going to a team where how does Russell Wilson succeed, really? It's read option. It's play action, opening up the guys on the outside when he can, and how did that work with beast mode? With beast mode, it wasn't just a bruising kind of, downhill runner. It's that he had the explosiveness to bust a run. When he got to the second level of the defense, there was a threat there. Does 267-pound Eddie Lacy, who has not shown that kind of explosiveness the last couple of years, strike you as the kind of pickup that can do that once they get to the second level, once he gets to the second level of the defense? Because he doesn't for me, and that limits the entire offense.
My answer to that question is that he can explode in short yardage situations. What I mean by that is that he can assist in moving the chains. With Seattle, that's something that's paramount to them because you were devoid of an elite running attack and the offense struggled as a result. It was too much weight placed on the shoulders of the Legion of Boom, which is why they don't appear to be what they were. They lost Byron Maxwell a couple of years ago when they let him get away to Philadelphia. We found that good riddance, but in Seattle, he was obviously formidable. Earl Thomas goes out this year. If you remember a couple of years back, Cam Chancellor had held out because he wanted his contract renegotiated. So they've had some issues. So they've had some issues on the defensive side of the ball, and by having those issues on the defensive side of the ball, Max, it put more pressure on them because the offense wasn't producing for you. So if you got a guy, yeah, he might not explode for long gains, but if he could help you in short yardage situations and assist in moving those chains, that's going to take some pressure off of Seattle's defense, which is another reason I support the move.
I get why a team, particularly if it's not an old guy, wants to invest sometimes in a guy who's done it before. Because he's somewhere in there, at least once upon a time, not all that long ago, he's capable of being a premium producer. But you have to be wary in the NFL, especially, of the brand name, of the shiny object that no longer means what he once did, that name no longer indicates that real production. Because if you're getting something less than premium production, and with Eddie Lacy, that's been the case recently, much less, you're better off drafting a guy or picking up an unsigned free agent somewhere who may be able to do the same thing for less money.
I have a question on that, and it might not be less money. I also want to point out that Adam Schefter is reporting that Jamal Charles is also scheduled to make a visit there today, regardless of the Lacy signing. Stephen A., why do you think they didn't go for Adrian Peterson here?
Well, first of all, I think that when you look at Adrian Peterson, they don't get money, but they also don't consider him to be the power back that the Eddie Lacy and those guys are. So Adrian Peterson, arguably the greatest, one of the greatest clearly in NFL history, he has an idea of what his worth entails. And because of that, you have to deal with that reality combined with the fact that as great as he is, he was going to be a focal point of that offense because you're going to want to give Adrian Peterson the ball. With Eddie Lacy, you could choose to do so, you cannot choose to do so. And not only that, the durability, even though he was out this past season, remember, this is the only season he's really been out, where he played 5 games this year. Other than that, the first 3 years of his career, he's been relatively healthy. You can't say that about Adrian Peterson. Eddie Lacy's 26 years of age. Adrian Peterson is 32. We got to take that into consideration as well. These are the kind of things that they're thinking about. And got to remember, even though that Adrian Peterson is a workout warrior, and we certainly don't question his greatness or his commitment. The fact is, if you Eddie Lacy and you plan for a new contract, you're more incentivized than anybody because you haven't made the money that Adrian Peterson has made in his career, and that's another thing they would consider.
It could come down to who's getting a 1-year deal versus who's getting multiple years, but just in a vacuum, I take Adrian Peterson this upcoming season over Lacy.
Let's leave it there. You heard what the guys think about Lacy's move to the Northwest, but do you like the Seahawks picking up feast mode? Oh, you all are just wrong for that. Find us on Twitter and vote now. Kirk Cousins says he didn't demand a trade after meeting with Redskins owner Dan Snyder, but do the guys believe him?
I'm at a shoe store later that day after Chris Mortensen reported that, and the guy fitting my wife her shoes says, I heard you demanded a trade, and I laughed, and I thought, I don't know where that comes from because that just wasn't the case.
Mitch Trubisky are considered the top 2 quarterbacks in this year's draft, but one might be waiting a while before he finds his new home. Find out who when Todd McShay reveals his newest mock draft. That's coming up next.